healing our lineage is a key towards wholeness and healing. And as I talk about ancestors, I really mean both our blood, biological ancestors, but also our spiritual ancestors. As a member of the queer community, I remember all of the queer ancestors who have gone before me. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of an all-encompassing ancestors. So this is the last photo I have together with my parents. It was 2013. It was my graduation from my master's program. And my parents supported me and encouraged me to pursue my education as a first-generation college student. That's my dad, Dave, my mom, Monica. And they're no longer with us in spirit. My dad passed away in 2016 and mom last year. And my parents were the definition of mestizos. Mestizos mean that you are a person of mixed blood. My dad was Filipino, Mexican, Spanish. My mom was Mexican, Spanish, Pueblo. And they grew up in a time where you were not encouraged to be your cultural self. We did not grow up speaking Spanish. My grandparents didn't speak Spanish. My grandparents had been here. A saying that I like to say is, they did not cross the border crossed them. Part of my, I didn't come up with that. That's a quote from somebody. But culturally, they didn't speak Spanish, nor did they really celebrate things such as Dia de los Muertos or any of the other Independence Days. And so that meant to me that I inherited a sense of displacement. And that was functionally okay, right? Like that we functioned in the broader white American society. But deep down, especially where I grew up in the South, was not something that I felt proud to be in. In fact, I felt ashamed. And my whole journey to what I'm going to be talking about today began 375 days ago when I was thousands of miles away from home at Unity Village, actually. I was about to go on a retreat. And I got the news that my mom had unexpectedly passed away. And in the ensuing months of the physical, the emotional grief, and obviously the business part of death, which no one ever really talks about, but cleaning things out and sorting through paperwork, by January of this year, I was emotionally and from a soul level, just tired. And I had one of my dearest friends who's Peruvian. She told me, she reminded me actually about Curanderismo, which Curanderismo means it's a Latin American healing modality, spiritual healing. And I did my research and came across a limpia, which limpia means cleansing. It's a cleansing ceremony. And I went to this healing ceremony with this strong, matronly curandera. And she had an altar set up like this. I have it's a smoke incense carrier, copal carrier, actually. It's called a sumidor. She had some beautiful aromatic romero, rosemary. If you crack it, it smells so beautiful. And then she lit a candle. For demonstration purposes, I have Selena on my calendar, candle. And as she cleansed me, she gave me a generational ancestral limpia. So specifically, I went because my parents had died at a young age. And in fact, my grandparents had died from a young age. And she healed generations, up to 7 generations. She said a series of prayers. And during that whole time, I just was weeping, and it was so cleansing. And I just imagine, I just can still smell the herbs that she was sweeping over me. It's called a baria. And she swept all of this spiritual garbage and but also like grief and heaviness from not just me, but 7 generations of people who had been subjugated and who had been told that they could not be themselves. And also, as on an aside, also my queer side, right? You couldn't be yourself either, being a queer person. And I left that session feeling so much clearer. And as someone who hadn't who wasn't raised speaking Spanish, or didn't even like have a sense of my own cultural identity, I left that day so committed to reaching down and discovering that for myself. And so I dove into, I started quite practically taking Spanish lessons. I take a Spanish lesson every week. I speak with a tutor in Guadalajara. And I also had to learn this healing modality myself. I just felt like this is transformational in healing people's lives. And so I enrolled in a course for Curanderismo, especially actually people who are of QT BIPOC community. And so I did that for a couple of months. And in fact, actually Friday, I found out that I got accepted into their apprenticeship program for next year. Thank you. So I look forward to bringing some more of my learnings in that to Unity San Francisco. But I left and just felt so much more at peace. My soul felt better. My grief was still there. Grief, I still hold it. It still comes in waves and all of that. But I feel a sense of connection to my ancestors that I never did before. And particularly, of course, my parents. And I'll talk about that in just a second. And as I was diving into Curanderismo, I read a book by a woman named Elena Avila, and she was a psychiatric nurse practitioner / curandera. So she brought her physical medical sciences mixed with her traditional Mexican healing. And this quote really highlighted my own sense of pride as a mestizo person. So she says, the first mestizos were homeless and had no definite place in society. I'd certainly felt like that. But somehow, we descendants of those outcasts of mixed blood have survived, which is a reflection of how strong our spirits are. And I think that in terms of the diversity that is in this beautiful community, I think we can say that for maybe different parts of of everyone's ancestry. And so there's this concept of la frontera, where it's feeling like you are at the cornerstone of you're not part of the broader American white patriarchal society, but you're also not necessarily completely Mexican because you're not in Mexico and you're in this weird space. And for me, I felt that way, especially as a queer person who was raised in the South, who was this and that. And it's just a sense of knowing that our ancestry may have not been at the surface, but it survived deep in there. So this was so healing. And so I'm offering a couple of insights, so you can take them as you will, and healing your own ancestry and coming to terms with what is healing within you. The first is that there are no borders within spirit. And this can also be a social commentary, but for terms of today, we're talking about the spirit realm, the unseen. And that night that I was at Unity Village, an angel came and picked me up in the form of a woman, and she took me to the airport because I couldn't get a taxi at midnight that would drive all the way to the Unity Village, and she told me in my darkest hour that my mom was with me even more than she was when she was on this physical plane. And even in that moment, that was like the hardest time to ever be, I felt the truth in that, actually. And so I realized that, and even in the Unity teachings, there are five principles in Unity teaching. The first is that there is only one power and one presence in the universe. And so if I believe that, then I know that there's no separation. My mom is with me, my dad is with me, my best friend Angelo is with me. And it's the sense that when we bring their memories, we're bringing them alive. When we call out their names, we bring them alive. And we can also heal them and offer forgiveness. The next insight that I found is to embrace the underworld. And I mean the underworld kind of as a metaphorical sense. In Dia de los Muertos, it's really about a celebration of calling our ancestors back. And so we have the marigolds and the candles, and it's all to welcome our ancestors back with us. And I have also realized that meant that we make friends in the hard places. We stand in our grief. We talk about, as Reverend Ken talks about, feeling your feelings through to completion. So it means giving time to crying and to having bad days and to retreating from society. But it also means celebrating our ancestors, celebrating those parts of ourselves that we don't want to celebrate at sometimes. And so often that means also eating the food of our ancestors, the very practical sustenance, symbol of our ability to have nutrition and in the good of life. Every year on my dad's birthday, April 24th, my sister and my aunt and our families, we go to La Guadalajara in San Leandro, which is a little restaurant, and we get a super burrito because that's what my dad loved. And so in eating those foods, we connect with him. We bring him alive. So making friends in those deep, hard places is incredibly healing because you have to feel things through. And the last insight is to offer compassion to our ancestors. One time in meditation, I had seen one of my ancestors who I had grown up hearing stories about how she was abusive and was a cold-hearted person and all of these things. And I just saw her, and I had the insight, I had the distance from her as well, to see that she was broken herself. She had been abused. She had grown up in the 40s, raising children on her own as a single woman, and in Central California, and so it was just, I had that sense of love for her, and so I offered her forgiveness. And because there are no borders in spirit, when we offer our ancestors forgiveness, we offer ourselves forgiveness. And that's what we really need, right? And, I also acknowledge that my ancestors were also Spanish European. So that also meant that I had to give them compassion and forgiveness for colonizing my indigenous ancestors. And so having that sense of wholeness brings a centeredness to me as a mestizo person. Part of forgiving our ancestors is realizing that oftentimes they were acting out of survival, meaning that, they were just trying to put food on the table, and so they needed to do what they needed to do to make things work. As a person now who has also the unity consciousness, we can also know that I can operate now out of a sense of purpose. Gratefully, I believe in the power of abundance, so all of my needs are met, so I don't have to worry about survival per se. I can focus on my purpose and integrating and healing myself. And so that's what we can offer ourselves as well, is focus on healing and purpose and forgiveness. And so in closing, I want to read this quote and by an amazing poet and Chicana activist named Gloria Anzaldúa. And I'm not a poetry person, but I read her poetry and it connected with me because she writes about that intersection of being a queer person who was raised in Texas, who didn't necessarily speak Spanish, and was also an activist. And so this quote we can be read, she's referring to mestizos, but this can also be read to no matter what your ancestry is. She says, stubborn, persevering, impenetrable as stone, yet possessing a malleability that renders us unbreakable. We, and you can insert whatever your ancestry is, the mestizas and mestizos will remain. If you're here today, that means you remain. If you're watching us online, that means you remain.